Good evening and welcome back to another episode of The Longing, where today we are going to be continuing to read The Secret Garden by Frances Hodgson Burnett. So, let's get going. Chapter 12. Might I have a bit of earth? Mary ran so fast that she was rather out of breath when she reached her room. Her hair was ruffled on her forehead, and her cheeks were bright pink. Her dinner was waiting on the table, and Martha was waiting near it. "There's a bit late," she said. "Where has there been?" "I've seen Dickon," said Mary. "I've seen Dickon." "I knew he'd come," said Martha exultantly. "How does thee like him?" I think he's beautiful," said Mary in a determined voice. Martha looked rather taken aback, but she looked pleased too. "Well," she said, "he's the best lad as ever was born, but us never thought he was handsome. His nose turns up too much." "I like it to turn up," said Mary. "And his eyes is so round," said Martha, a trifle doubtful, "though they are a nice colour." "I like 'em round," said Mary, "and they are exactly the colour of the sky over the moor." Martha beamed with satisfaction. "Mother says he made 'em that colour with always looking up at the birds and clouds. But he has got a big mouth, hasn't he now?" "I love his big mouth," said Mary obstinately. "I wish mine were just like it." Martha chuckled delightedly. "It'd look rare and funny in thy bit of a face," she said, "but I knowed it would be that way when they saw him. How did they like the seeds and garden tools?" "How did you know he brought them?" asked Mary. "I never thought of him not bringing 'em. He'd be sure to bring 'em if they was in Yorkshire. He's such a trusty lad." Mary was afraid that she might begin to ask difficult questions, but she did not. She was very much interested in the seeds and gardening tools, and there was only one moment where Mary was frightened. This was when she began to ask where the flowers were to be planted. "Who did that ask about it?" she inquired. "I haven't asked anybody yet," said Mary, hesitating. "Well, I wouldn't ask the head gardener. He's too grand, Mr. Roach is." "I've never seen him," said Mary. "I've only seen under-gardeners and Ben Weatherstaff." "If I was you, I'd ask Ben Weatherstaff," advised Martha. "He's not half as bad as he looks, for all he's so crabbed. Mr. Craven lets him do what he likes, because he was here when Mrs. Craven was alive, and he used to make her laugh. She liked him. Perhaps he'd find you a corner somewhere out of the way." "If it was out of the way and no one wanted it, no one could mind my having it, could they?" Mary said anxiously. "There wouldn't be no reason," answered Martha. "You wouldn't do no harm." Mary ate her dinner as quickly as she could, and when she rose from the table she was going to run to her room to put on her hat again, but Martha stopped her. "I've got something to tell you," she said. "I thought I'd let you eat your dinner first. Mr. Craven came back this morning, and I think he wants to see you." Mary turned quite pale. "Oh," she said. Why? He didn't want to see me when I came. I heard Pitcher say he didn't." "Well," explained Martha, "Mrs. Medlock says it's because of Mother. She was walking to Thwaite village and she met him. She'd never spoke to him before, but Mrs. Craven had been to our cottage 2 or 3 times. He'd forgot, but Mother hadn't, and she made bold to stop him. I don't know what she said to him about you, but she said something has put him in mind to see you before he goes away again tomorrow." "Oh," cried Mary. "Is he going away tomorrow? I'm so glad. He's going for a long time. He mayn't come back till autumn or winter. He's going to travel in foreign places. He's always doing it." "Oh, I'm so glad," said Mary thankfully. If he did not come back until winter, or even autumn, there would be time to watch the secret garden come alive. Even if he found out then and took it away from her, she would have had that much at least. When do you think you will want to see—" She did not finish that sentence, because the door opened, and Mrs. Medlock walked in. She had on her best black dress and cap, and a collar was fastened with a large brooch with a picture of a man's face on it. It was a coloured photograph of Mr. Medlock, who had died 10 years ago, and she always wore it when she was dressed up. She looked nervous and excited. "Your hair's rough," she said quickly. "Go and brush it. Martha, help her to slip on her best dress. Mr. Craven sent me to bring her to him in his study." All the pink left Mary's cheeks. Her heart began to thump, and she felt herself changing into a stiff, plain, silent child again. She did not even answer Mrs. Medlock, but turned and walked into her bedroom, followed by Martha. She said nothing while her dress was changed, and her hair was brushed, and after she was quite tidy, she followed Mrs. Medlock down the corridors in silence. What was there for her to say? She was obliged to go and see Mr. Craven, and he would not like her, and she would not like him. She knew what he would think of her. She was taken to a part of the house she had not been into before. At last Mrs. Medlock knocked at a door, and when someone said, "Come in," they entered the room together. A man was sitting in an armchair before the fire, and Mrs. Medlock spoke to him. "This is Miss Mary, sir," she said. "You can go and leave her here. I will ring for you when I want you to take her away," said Mr. Craven. When she went out and closed the door, Mary could only stand waiting, a plain little thing, twisting her thin hands together. She could see that the man in the chair was not so much a hunchback as a man with high, rather crooked shoulders, and he had black hair streaked with white. He turned his head over his high shoulders and spoke to her. "Come here," he said. Mary went to him. He was not ugly. His face would have been handsome if it had not been so miserable. He looked as if the sight of her worried and fretted him, and as if he did not know what in the world to do with her. "Are you well?" he asked. "Yes," answered Mary. "Do they take good care of you?" "Yes." He rubbed his forehead fretfully as he looked her over. "You are very thin," he said. "I am getting fatter," Mary answered in what she knew was her stiffest way. What an unhappy face he had. His black eyes seemed as if they scarcely saw her, as if they were seeing something else, and he could hardly keep his thoughts upon her. "I forgot you," he said. "How could I remember you? I intended to send you a governess or a nurse, or someone of that sort. But I forgot." "Please," began Mary. "Please," and then the lump in her throat choked her. "What do you want to say?" he inquired. I am too big for a nurse," said Mary. "And please don't make me have a governess yet." He rubbed his forehead again and stared at her. "That was what the Sorby woman said," he muttered absent-mindedly. Then Mary gathered a scrap of courage. Is she Martha's mother?" she stammered. "Yes, I think so," he replied. "She knows about children," said Mary. "She has 12, she knows." He seemed to rouse himself. "What do you want to do?" "I want to play out of doors," Mary answered, hoping that her voice did not tremble. "I never liked it in India. It makes me hungry here, and I am getting fatter." He was watching her. "Mrs. Sorby said it would do you good." "Perhaps it will," he said. "She thought you had better get stronger before you had a governess." "It makes me feel strong when I play, and the wind comes over the moor," argued Mary. "Where do you play?" he asked next. "Everywhere," gasped Mary. "Martha's mother sent me a skipping rope. I skip and run, and I look about to see if things are beginning to stick up out of the earth. I don't do any harm." "Don't look so frightened," he said in a worried voice. "You could not do any harm, a child like you. You may do what you like." Mary put her hand up to her throat, because she was afraid he might see the excited lump which she felt jump into it. She came a step nearer to him. And with that, we come to the end of the episode, as always. So, I will say thank you very much for joining me today. I hope you all have a wonderful morning, evening, afternoon or night. No matter what time of day it is, I hope you all have a wonderful one of it. And as always, we will be back tomorrow for more of The Longing. Goodbye.